And here they go.
Now live. Mike from Denton, one of the first one in. Nice to see you. Glad. Laura Joe, good to see you again. Man, this is, we were talking earlier as we kind of tuned in to make sure we looked good in front of each other. We were totally checking each other out, just to be honest. Let's not be negative. But we were talking about how fun it is when we first open this up and you see everybody like Alfredo, my man. Alfredo, you're back again. I love it because Alfredo's been with us every step of the way, every week. And we've got 48 of you now tuning in. This is always, it's so exciting, right? We put this up. Of course, we do our best to, curate these, moderate these, and schedule guests and panelists like these incredible people that you'll get to hear from today. And obviously, we hope that as you tune in every week, first of all, you're not alone. This is an incredible community. Our industry, travel and hospitality industry, we know has been suffering, hit very, very hard, struggling, but we really, we band together. And this is a powerful community, very positive, community, and certainly positively impacting, our neighborhoods and our destinations. And so I think the spirit of all of that shows up on these calls in your activity. So as you're tuning in and as we get started here, a couple quick housekeeping notes. You can certainly, everybody is probably Zoom experts by now, but you can change your view to either just, if you're on speaker view, you're probably just seeing my beautiful face right now, which that might get tiring. It does to me, I know. So, but if you change that to gallery view, you can see everybody, which is really fun. And I love that because, we miss this face-to-face, right? Will, right? How you doing over there? How's Southwest Florida treating you?
Oh, Florida's good. We finally got rid of the rain, so it's a nice day today after that Cristobal did some damage, but it's good. Josh, thanks for being here and continuing moderating this. This has been one of the bright spots of the lockdown has been the weekly conversations, and I want to thank you and Streetsense for being such amazing partners and sponsors, and most importantly, thank you for your time and kind of guidance and wisdom and keeping these conversations active, alive, and probably most important, positive and proactive. Yeah. And so thank you for that. Your support means an awful lot to us, means a lot to the industry. So I'm looking forward to our conversation today.
Yeah, it's going to be good. And we've got 73 tuning in, and really excited for this conversation today. We've been inundated with data. We certainly, those of us in the industry, myself, formerly, on the DMO side myself for many years in Franklin, Tennessee, which is where I live, just south of Nashville. You're always trying to make the most of what data you can get, and then hopefully, right, Jay, make meaning of it, make great meaning of it, right? Certainly. And so just really happy for this conversation. Glad for all of you that are tuning in to get to meet Jay and Jamie and Emily if you haven't. And I'll certainly allow them to introduce themselves here in a moment. But as we go along today, this hour conversation, know that you can, welcome one another. If you see your friends in the attendees or those, feel free to say hello. Like Glenn, good to see you. I'm glad you're Gina as well. I'm glad you guys are tuning in and taking the time. It really does mean a lot. I'm glad that you're joining in. And then certainly if you've got questions, as you have questions, you can drop those in the Q&A. You can drop those in the chat any way we can. We'll do the best we can to get to those questions and answer them specifically. So why don't we go ahead and get started? Emily, when I'm looking at my screen, you're immediately right next to me. So why don't we start off with you. How are you doing? Introduce yourself and let those that are tuning in get to know you.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. I've been tuning into these every week. So I've, seen Alfredo, Kate, I saw you. So hi. I am a tourism sales manager at Experience Scottsdale. So right now it's like 80 degrees and absolutely beautiful, which we're enjoying considering it's mid-June in the desert. But really excited to be here and chat about the data. I was a psych major too. So data gets me all excited to talk about and dissect.
That's awesome. Scottsdale. I mean, you know, I've played golf there, so I've been there, and I love Scottsdale. So I'm glad you're joining us in here. Jay, my friend, I'm really glad you're here. It's so good to see you. I miss the days of getting to bump into you at the halls at different events. Just
Yes.
to be honest with you, I miss that. I miss our ability to nerd out with each other on what we're learning and what we're seeing and building, especially. So glad you're here. For those that don't know you, why don't you introduce yourself and a little bit of your background and what you're excited about today?
Sure. I'm Jay Kinghorn. I'm Chief Innovation Officer at Entrada Insights, a relatively new company. We build a data warehouse and analytics solution built by DMOs for DMOs. And I'm coming to you today from Salt Lake City, Utah. And we actually got snow on the mountains yesterday. We've got a beautiful spring day today, but we've got a blanket of snow capping the Wasatch Range, and it's gorgeous. Prior to co-founding Entrada, I was Associate Managing Director at the Utah Office of Tourism for 6.5 years.
Yes.
Happy to be here.
Yes, fantastic, man. Blanket of snow. I would love to be on that right now. That would be amazing. That's incredible. And then again, I'm so happy, Jamie, that you were available to join us. To me, you are a rock star, my friend, and I am so thankful that you're here. I really am glad that you are tuning in. For those that you don't know, Jamie Lane from CBRE, certainly, Jamie, you introduce yourself, but you know, Jamie is one of the smartest guys I have ever met looking at this stuff in hospitality. And I'm saying that, I know you probably don't like me saying that, but I'm really serious. Just incredibly impressed. Love what you are doing, what you're studying, and how you're publishing that. And certainly Streetsense benefits greatly because CBRE is a great partner of ours, owning 50% of Streetsense. And so I know collectively that just really positions us well to offer all kinds of intelligence for DMO clients, destination clients, hotels, resorts, attractions, et cetera. So thank you for being here, man. How are you doing?
Yeah, thanks, Josh. I'm actually doing great on vacation right now. I'm from Atlanta, but I'm in Litchfield Beach right now, just south of Myrtle Beach with my family. Spent the whole morning at the beach. Now we're just doing nap time now. I'm going to spend the hour with you guys. So excited to do that. But for those of you who don't know me, I'm Senior Director and Head of Hotel Research for CBRE Hotels. I've worked with this group now for just north of 10 years. And before being acquired by CBRE, our group was known by PKF Hospitality Research, which some of the destinations may know that name. And we provide forecasting, benchmarking services for the hospitality industry, and have been following this pandemic very closely, trying to update our forecasts. And as we all get more information and giving all of you guys and our clients sort of the best information possible to be able to plan for the months and years ahead.
Yeah, I know many of you that have joined have been emailing back and forth with me, and I sent or attached Jamie's most recent forecast recently to you. But Jamie, if for those tuning in, I'd love for them to be able to get that. If you'll at some point drop a link down in the chat box for them to get that, that would be fantastic. I know everyone on here will benefit from it. So why don't we dive in and kind of, you know, certainly, you know, the travel industry, as we think about it, both holistically and historically, has had, you know, an unprecedented past decade of success and growth. Right. I know many destinations, certainly me while I was at Visit Franklin, year after year, incredible growth, outpacing national average. But in many destinations like that. So, you know, now it's like obviously totally different. Pandemic knows no preference, affected us all. And we essentially are all starting from scratch. We're all really starting from zero and looking to rebuild visitation, rebuild our visitor economies, rebuild, you know, ADR, occupancy, RevPAR, et cetera, from really historically high, you know, historical highs, right? So as we kind of think about that and we think about what the data is telling you, both Jay, Emily, and Jamie, as y'all are looking at your data and seeing what are you guys thinking? How are you advising us? How are we starting over, and what are the things that we need to be thinking about as we are starting over? Emily, let's just check in with you first there at Scottsdale.
Yeah, definitely. So Scottsdale, for those who aren't familiar with the destination, so obviously we're in Arizona. We're in the Sonoran Desert, which is this beautiful, lush green desert. So as a lot of people know, it has a reputation of being very hot, but not like the South. No humidity out here. It's definitely dry. But that message is always really important for us to tell the world and tell our stakeholders. And so I think that we're in an interesting position compared to a lot of cities, because when the pandemic hit us, it hit in March and it hit in April, which are two of our strongest seasons. A lot of our partners, that is kind of how they get enough revenue to sustain through the summer to get back to our shoulder. So I think we're in a fortunate location because we have focused, our marketing team's done a great job of rolling out a campaign called It's That Hot. It's very cheeky. It's a great play on words. But really, we're relying on our partners. What are those rates that provide savings? Because traditionally, as our temperatures have gone up, kind of rates and savings kind of also go with that. But right now, it's kind of changing the landscape, because partners who have stayed true to the staycation and to our local community are doing a lot better because they're already prepared. They've done it before. They're ready to keep doing it. But then there's other people who maybe they never looked at a local market before, and they've only looked at people coming from other markets. And so for us, it's trying to educate them, explain, hey, this is your backyard. Looking at that local market, looking throughout the state for people who might be coming to take advantage of our beautiful resorts and our pools. That was the other thing. A lot of our hotels were able to stay open just because they had essential workers, but a lot had to close. And we still have some of our, famed resorts that aren't open. And we have people that are wanting to come, but now it's like, okay, the pool's limited. So this year it's a little different, because right now what we're in the process of doing is we can't speak on behalf of our full membership base, but we're trying to get the correspondence out that if people go to our website, there's a little panel where it's like, are they open? Yes or no? And then what are they doing from a safety perspective? Because we know that's going to be very valuable and important as well. So for us, it's listening, it's keeping our ear on the ground. All of us are always listening to reports on cases, on what's happening, what's the travel trend. So I think it'll be an interesting summer. Our occupancy is definitely low, but it's at least higher than I know a lot of other cities are. For us, a lot of hotels, especially the larger luxury, well-known resorts, it's hard. They have a lot more rooms. And so it's, we know summer is traditionally slower. We know that group business is what kind of divides that to make it sustainable to stay open. And so a lot of them had to weigh those questions. And so for us, all we can do as the DMO is represent our destination as we have, keep pushing our beautiful outdoors, our spacious resorts, our golf, and hope people come and take advantage of our It's That Hot perfect season.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense, and it's kind of presenting a new challenge. If you're saying that historically you would see, you would see average metrics across summer, and now, of course, with all this pent up demand, Jay, I know you guys are studying this. I mean, you are providing incredible intelligence. I know firsthand from what I've seen with Mitch at Fort Worth, right, and the work that you guys are doing there, which is incredible. But those that aren't necessarily familiar with Entrada and your work there, certainly, what are you guys seeing? How are you making meaning of what you're seeing too?
I think the first trend that we're seeing is that all of the movement indicators are up, and Jamie's going to have some more detail on that. But I wanted to dovetail on a couple of things that Emily said that I think are really important. One is listening to the community, listening to the travelers, listening to the businesses in your community, to really focus on the safety aspect, because we're all hungry to bring those visitors back, to welcome them. At the same time, we want to make sure that we're doing it safely. There were a number of reports just this morning about the uptick in new COVID cases following travel over Memorial Day weekend. So I think there's a balance that each destination wants to weigh. We're encouraging people to weigh it with their communities, their city councils, their board of directors, because there is the vulnerability from a PR perspective that if we welcome people too fast, too soon, and there's a resurgence, that tourism may get the blame for that, fairly or unfairly. But that's a cautionary note. But on a more positive note, what we're advising is, yeah, go ahead.
I just wanted to throw something in just
Yeah,
before we
please.
go to the positive note. So I just got back yesterday from my first post-lockdown business meeting. And so my first hotel stay, big, nice, beautiful resort. And I've been pretty open with this. You know, I live in a really safe community. I'm not necessarily wearing masks everywhere I go, but I was expecting this over the top kind of safety and security message. And this was a 400 room property. The night I was there were 28 bodies on property. When I came back home after dinner, there was a front desk and two security guards. But again, I'm a pretty confident, safe traveler. I feel really good about being out and about. They were not nearly as safe and clean as I would have expected, and it bothered me more than I ever could imagine. I was more uncomfortable in that hotel room than I've been in 4 months, you know, at a grocery store. So I think, to your point of listening and the role of DMOs, it is critical to project safety, because even the most confident travelers are going to really be disappointed if it's not really in your face. I mean, didn't even have a letter from the GM on all the things that they're doing to clean the room that I was in, you know, so
Wow.
little simple things that I thought was really disappointing. So I'm on a little bit of a warpath now, saying we've got to communicate it, over communicate it. It might seem ridiculous and over the top, but to the point of listening, even the most conservative travelers are recognizing if it doesn't look like, because I figured if they're not telling me about everything they're doing, then
You don't
how
know.
are they even doing it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so that's a really good example. And so we've seen a number of destinations who are DMOs who are putting on their website what the safety protocols are, how the hotels are taking a clean pledge, what they're doing to keep the visitor safe. And that signaling, exactly as you pointed out through your story, Will, is really important. I think we're kind of seeing two things shaping up, one being the short term and one being the long term. The short term is just trying to get people back to work and start to get people in the communities and spending money. When we did a series of studies with our destinations at the beginning of the pandemic, what we heard from small businesses is that only 1 out of 5 had enough cash on hand to make it 180 days of closure. And so there's an acute need, particularly for the small businesses who are very vulnerable in the communities, to make sure that they're keeping the lights on. And so the DMO has that opportunity to start to bring people back. It will typically be at a lower capacity, typically be from the drive markets is what we're seeing. People are still a little reluctant to get on airplanes, but the drive markets are probably going to come back first, and people who are familiar with the destinations. So that leads to a change in marketing strategy. But then I think also longer term, and I know that we'll get into this a little bit later, Josh, is thinking broadly about this is an opportunity to reset what tourism looks like in your community, how tourism interacts with economic development, how tourism interacts with resident quality of life, business development, resident satisfaction, and to think really broadly and holistically around what the DMO's role is in all of that, and how you can plan for the long-term growth and recovery of the community.
Yeah, there's been a ton of, I love that you mentioned listening too, because it's a core component to really learning how to better engage, your audience. And as you define those audiences, both, that has shifted as we've better defined them locally, and it's shifting a little bit as we better define them as a drive market, a potential drive market audience, right? And so forth and so on. And so, there's really good sentiment studies that have been done out there. I was just looking at one that it's been updated, and I'll post a link to it from Morning Consult. And, from what they're looking at, roughly we have seen an increase from about 18% to 32% now of people itching to get out of the house. But while they're itching to get out of the house, 32% are saying willing to go on a vacation, right? So there's still a pretty good gap to climb to convince them. So to Will's point, right? So reiterating that message of safety, cleanliness, all those kinds of things, that's going to be really important to kind of, dial the needle, move the needle, so to speak, with consumer confidence in that. Jamie, I want to kind of toss to you next, because, your forecasting, I'm privy to so much more than those that are probably tuning in, because I've sat on calls and I've listened to you, and when we've had conversations and meetings and stuff, but you also have this vantage point of seeing things from a much wider, broader a point of view globally because of CBRE's presence globally. So tell us a little bit about what you're seeing, those trends, and kind of the meaning you're making of them.
Yeah, so, and we've got a client base of all the major hotel brands, operating companies, management companies. Not only do they share us with their data, but they also share with us what they're seeing, and we're monitoring everything very closely from the beginning, and in January, February, seeing what was happening in China and Europe, and then getting ready for the upcoming pandemic on the US. And now that we're sort of in it, we expect that we're through it, that the low point was in mid-April. Now we're really trying to get a sense of where do we go from here. And we all have a ton of data sort of coming to us every day of new cases, GPS data, travel data, hotel occupancy, forward bookings, current bookings. And what we try to do is distill all that data into a forecast for each of these markets on when is occupancy going to come back, at what rates are those going to come back at, and it's hard. It's never been as difficult to forecast, and I'm sure most of you are thinking that as well, as you're looking to update your own stakeholders on what the expectations are going forward. The number one thing I'm looking at today, and it's sort of a new metric for all of us, is the number of new cases and what are the death rates. Are things starting to tick back up, and what might that mean for the rest of the summer travel season as we go ahead, as we move on. And it is scary as we look at cases in some of the southern states. We do think there's a lot of political will to keep things open, and that gives me confidence that at least in the near term, we're going to continue opening. Occupancy is going to continue to tick back up. We just got the latest numbers from STAR today. On the previous week, we're up to 39%. That's almost double what we were at in mid-April, where we hit the low of 21%. And to the extent that your market can support leisure drive-to demand, you're probably seeing a lot of that occupancy, and we think that's going to continue into the summer months. So there's a lot of reason for optimism, but there's also gonna be a lot more pain for at least the rest of 2020 and probably the first half of 2021 as well.
Yeah, do you think that, similar to how, I know, right, you guys that are, much smarter than me when it comes to data and processing the data, right? The predictions and the analysis is obviously only as good as what we input, right? I mean, the quality that we're inputting into these models and formulas and stuff like that. But as we think about, that maybe that recovery speeding up, right? And then even thinking regionally, like what are your thoughts around that, Jay and Jamie? Any kind of, certainly don't want to hold you to being the prophet today, you know what I mean? But what are you guys seeing as maybe potential and optimism around recovery speed being differently than, and as we move ahead?
Maybe Jay, I'll speak for a second and then pass it over to you. So we're breaking out so the recovery in a few different ways. One is recovery and demand by segmentation and let's predict what leisure demand is going to come back at. Let's predict what group demand is going to come back at, corporate demand, inbound international demand, and then we've got a baseline. And then we can measure as they come back, was that quicker or slower than we expect them to? And then we can adjust our forecast off of there. So in all honesty, leisure demand has come back quicker than we expected. And that's a function of states opening up quicker than we're expecting. So and we still haven't seen any real recovery in corporate or group or inbound international, though we weren't expecting that for well into the fall and some of those segmentations into 2021 once we hopefully have a vaccine. So, and where are we based on our original expectations that we published, let's say a month ago? We're a little ahead of where we expected to be. I'm 1 month in on those expectations because leisure has been a bit stronger than we expected. And then there's also the points that Emily was making on Scottsdale and the markets that rely most heavily on the spring months in April, May, June. And that was one of the first things we looked at because of really how it impacts compression pricing. So markets like Phoenix, Charleston, West Palm Beach, New Orleans, Savannah, Tampa see a really high percentage of their overall revenue during those spring travel months because of the compression they're able to get and the higher rates than the rest of the year, which is obviously going to impact those markets. But then we also have closures, and some markets are still over 50% closed. As demand starts to come back and hotels feel comfortable opening up again, that is going to slow down the overall recovery that individual maybe properties are seeing as there's more properties competing for that demand. But on the plus side, and the markets that you all cover and live and operate in are going to see much more marketing from those properties, much more sort of overall activity, which is a good thing.
Jay, I'd love to.
I've
Yeah.
got a question for Jay. You know, I'd say that probably pretty much everybody in this call has been working in the tourism industry, and you know, the majority of their lifetime has been this 10 years of quarter over quarter, year over year growth. And I've followed what you've been talking about at eTourism summits for years, and really getting a handle on what kind of data sets, what kind of inputs we can get. But it was all we were gathering, organic traffic and page visits and social and STR data and flight data and all this really cool stuff, which was really neat. But it was everything was going up, and we were in a nice full cycle, full funnel life of tourism marketing. So my question for you, which I think just knowing what Entrada is doing could be really, really fascinating stuff, is to highlight the kind of leading indicators that we're seeing. I think it's a time where we can learn what really matters, and that can be really powerful moving forward.
Yeah, you're right that this pandemic really exposed how reliant the tourism industry as a whole is on lagging indicators. Typically the freshest data that we would get would be STAR data that would come in every week. And so what happened last quarter or last year was not a good indicator for what was happening right now through the course of this. And so we've been working, we're fortunate that we have a PhD on staff who specializes in supercomputer simulations of complex models. And what he's been working on in predicting the time recovery for our clients is looking at a variety of different data sets that we're looking at. OpenTable has published a data set on restaurant reservations and recovery. Google's published a mobility study. We have location data. We have Google Analytics information from organic search as an indicator. Kayak's published a data set. Then we also have location traffic to a destination. And all of those signals are telling a similar story in terms of the shape of the curve, though there's some variance in terms of which are the leading indicators and which are the lagging or confirmatory indicators. And so we're working on building out the different simulations to that. But I think the real challenge in the prediction and coming up with a concrete forecast is, and Jamie alluded to it, is there are so many variables right now. What's going to be the reinfection rate? What's the transmission rate? What happens for the school year? What happens if schools continue to be closed? How is that going to impact the economic situation as well as traveler safety? So we're really optimistic about the trends that are taking place. We're seeing a lot more value that's placed on the situational awareness, what's happened in the past week or past 2 weeks as a good indicator of what's to come. That tends to be a better predictor of what your next 2 weeks will look like than what it was last year. But we also kind of have to be agile and adaptive to the situation as it continues to change and grow.
Emily, I'd love to hear kind of, you know, from you on the ground there, thinking through, you know, where we've been, and we had all kinds of conversations over the last several weeks about, you know, things we could learn. Will has brought a lot to the table about from his experience dealing with different you know, national disasters and everything. And of course, we've been talking about how this crisis is not like the other and any others, you know, for that matter. But all of those have taught us things, and we've all learned, you know, different rhythms of adapting. And I'm glad you bring up agility, Jay. So what things do you think Scottsdale is going to see? What changes, what adoptions, you know, what things maybe the short term and then maybe go away, and what do you think really kind of sticks around for the long haul?
Yeah, definitely. So, you know, I think the biggest thing, so similar to most DMOs, you know, we're contracted by the city. So we run on a fiscal year. Usually this is the time we're planning our programs of work, and we're super excited to see all these wonderful things that we're going to do. And this year, you know, the best word that we've been using is pivot and moving target, because those are the only two words that seem to be true. So even in the evolution of March, so the US was a little behind the curve from Europe and getting affected by, you know, the airlines stopped flying, hotels started to lose occupancy. So at first in March, it was kind of like, okay, now what? And I think that Scottsdale has done a really great job of being very empathetic to what's going on in the world, but not losing our voice. That's why they did their best to keep all of us within the team so that we're still reaching out to clients and we're hearing from them directly. Hey, are you getting bookings? I mean, from an international standpoint, receptives are having to move their 2021 booking up to like last month because all of these people are trying to rebook their travel. And if they don't have a 2021 rate, they're going to lose that sale. So having those conversations open while still being understanding that maybe they're at 30% hours this week, or knowing that. So that's the international. And then from a domestic standpoint, knowing that every year we do a report that focuses on visitation in partnership with our major hotels so that we know almost to the zip code of where people are coming from. And that's how we build our program. This year, you know, we are still holding on to that data, but someone in New York probably isn't going to be able to come to Scottsdale as easily as someone from California, or even New Mexico or Utah or other places that are nearby that maybe we haven't looked at, but we should look at a little better now. The other thing is, because we have these completely new opportunities, it's a shorter timeline. It's, hey, we're thinking of going into this market in July, but we're having to do the same thing and looking at, is there spikes in cases? Are businesses still open? Are these people going to be working? Can we even take them to dinner or coffee if we want to when we're in those markets? So these are all the things that we're having to look at right now as we're planning our program. So, you know, traditionally we've had a model based on markets. That's going to change. It's going to be based on, you know, me and my colleague. It's going to be, okay, we're going to divide and conquer this because this is where the attention is. And then we're going to keep our finger on the pulse. And if we see that international might be picking back up, okay, well, maybe one of us will drop off domestic and we'll focus our efforts there. But I think for us, we're not willing to take everything out of the pot because we know that this isn't like anything we've seen before. We're going to use historical data. We're going to look at budgets, you know, similar to other DMOs. We're directly funded by bed tax. So if bed tax is down, we're retroactively paid. Our budgets are smaller. It doesn't mean we can't do our job. We have members and stakeholders that need us to do a good job for our economy. So we're going to look at that, and we're going to do what we can from a historical analysis while understanding that times are different. In 2008, when things got tough, you know, we did have a lower budget. However, this is a completely different landscape. The travel agent, the tour operator, everyone works differently. So it's taking these historical experiences and the longevity of people in our organization and the leadership in that, and taking it with these fresh ideas. Hey, do we do things virtual? Should we try this? What kind of virtual? And so really for us, we're keeping our eye moving forward as best we can, but really understanding that we could be saying, we're going to go to San Diego next week. And then we find out that they've shut everything back down, and it's like, nope, and we're going somewhere else. So yeah. I think that's the most important thing, is to be completely flexible and, you know, keep your finger on the pulse, but understand that you're not going to know until you get out there and try and you have those conversations. And so I think that that's the big difference between something previously, because as you've alluded to with the data, we didn't think things would open, and here we are, and people are traveling. I see it all the time. I live in Old Town, which is, you know, our city center. And I was like, oh, and there's going to be no one here. The minute it opened, it was like anyone who could socially distance and get to a restaurant, they were there, and they wanted to be out because everyone's not been able to be social. So I think we don't give people enough credit for trying to get out there.
I love that you bring up, you know, your stakeholders and members. And Jay, I want to connect with you here because you and I have had a lot of these conversations offline, but and even Will as well. I mean, we have been in the last, you know, 8-9 weeks, we've been talking about how this pandemic is really speeding up the transformation and evolution of the role of the DMO, right? For years, we have talked in kind of really almost pithy terms around destination management, destination development, and stewardship, right? We have looked and responded to, you know, over tourism and what that might mean. And certainly it's obvious in some cases what it might mean, but others it's not so much, right? Because let's be honest, as we've learned, you know, 80% of our communications prior to this pandemic have all been external. So we've been ignoring the local sentiment, largely ignoring questions around quality of visitation, quality of life that they want, right? And all kinds of stuff like that. So I'd love to kind of hear from you, because I know you guys are working toward this, right? And you're really intentionally working toward this. So what are you seeing, and what are you thinking about it?
Yeah, I think, as you said, this has reshaped the landscape. That on one hand, you have DMOs who have been pulled into crisis communications mode, that they've been having to spend some marketing dollars to try and get people to stay home, support the local restaurants, support local businesses in a way that they've never been asked before. And in a way that's the city opening a door to the DMOs to say, we need your skills in a variety of different places that we didn't need them before. And so I think DMOs have this opportunity to start to think really broadly about what it looks like for a program. How does tourism be a sustainable, welcomed, valued member of the local community and of the local industry? And so that gets to things like, we're starting with our clients to track visitor to resident ratio. So on a given day and over the course of the year, how many visitors are there for every resident that you have in your community? And what happens when you have a peak festival? How does that change seasonally? How, as a DMO, would you want to structure your marketing campaigns, structure your communications with the board, the city, the residents around maybe not driving that peak higher, but smoothing it out over the course of the year? That would then influence higher visitor satisfaction, resident satisfaction. That hopefully would start to change the equation from those part-time, heavily seasonal jobs to full-time year-round jobs. There's a county commissioner that I interacted with at the Utah Office of Tourism. He always said, in our community, we want year-round, full-time, family-sustaining jobs. And that was his mantra. And I think it's a really good one, because it puts the emphasis not just on driving marketing ROI higher, but actually the net impact of that. Where is that spending taking place? And when we've worked in depth with location data, we see traveler spending in surprising places, like hospitals, retail centers. We know that people like to shop when they travel, but when you look at the location data, people really like to shop when they travel, and they spend money at the grocery stores and the Costco's and every retail center or shopping mall. They're among the top 5 places visited. And so as you can start to extrapolate that, you see that tourism is this bedrock for the economy, particularly in smaller communities, that's really important to take a leadership role in and start to expand and articulate. Here's the value that we're bringing back to the community from having a diversity of restaurants, places to eat, festivals. Here's how we're contributing to maintenance of the key programs that are important in your community. And then on top of that, here's how we're being good stewards of the dollars that we're entrusted to.
So you just used my trigger word, Jay, and I don't know if you did that on purpose or not. There's nothing that gets me excited and that you'll see me, you know, become impassioned more than the idea of stewardship, than really the essential core function that I think as a DMO we've lost sight of a little bit is really stewarding not just the visitation and thinking about, you know, we'll use the term heads and beds, and we'll devalue people by calling them a head and a bed, right? And instead of understanding the quality that we actually experience inside the destinations, right? And so stewardship is entirely everything. I know, I mean, it's the biggest reason that I'm at Streetsense and doing the work we do through the Vibrant Destination platform and leveraging data that we get from CBRE is because the role of the DMO, right? And you're seeing this in the sentiment studies that are coming out now, right? People are going, this pandemic has really made me rethink what matters most, right? I mean, there's a great article on Vox. I'll post a link to it today that was just published yesterday or this morning. I can't remember, but it's all about thinking about how what this pandemic has done to the consumer mindset, right? To human behavior and thinking about, oh, I used to really think transactionally, right? I used to really think about just consumption and consumerism and things like that, right? And that's what drove everything. And that's largely what we see DMOs doing, you know, is creating marketing materials that are all focused transactionally. You know, we'll do videos that are all about story selling, not necessarily authentic storytelling, right? And we'll see all that kind of activity where we miss the opportunity to connect on an emotional level with, you know, these potential travelers and get them to understand the value that they can find, right? That they can achieve and experience in our destinations. And stewardship is what helps position these DMOs, especially now moving forward, that says to the local members and stakeholders, like, actually, yeah, we can do all that, but we can do much more too. And we have all this greater value we can bring to improving not just visitation, but overall quality of life. I love it. It's really, really fantastic. Emily, are you guys seeing any of those conversations? And Will, I'd love for you to jump in at some point too, because I know you resonate a lot with this line of thought that we've been talking about. But you know, in Scottsdale, is the pandemic and is the need for a recovery of this visitor economy, is it opening up new doors and new conversations with your kind of local stakeholders?
So I would say it is and it isn't. So something that I think Scottsdale's done really well, and I think that's why we have been able to kind of position quicker and more nimbly than before, is we are always listening to our local community, our stakeholders, and our members. And we really do go out of our way throughout the year. We did it before the pandemic hit. We're doing it now that it's hit, just virtually. What I think that we've done a great job is it says, we go to our membership and we go to our stakeholders and say, when is your need period? We know people are coming for spring training. We know they're coming for waste management. We know they're coming in the spring season. So what do you need us to do? And so the first question they tackled was, how do you get people to come in the holiday season? Because we were seeing significant drops. And so that was the first campaign that was launched. And we've seen year over year growth that, you know, it's taking it from a slow part and making it connect the bridge between slow, shoulder, and peak. Then the second question was, okay, what's the next need? Summer. We absolutely need people here in the summer. And so we didn't launch It's That Hot this year. We've had it going. And so we're in a very fortunate position because we're building on a momentum that we already laid the foundation for. And I really think that we're in that position because we have listened. We've had those conversations. We've listened to the concerns. We've listened to the needs. And obviously, you know, our role as a DMO is to get people to the destination. And you can't ever do it perfect. And everyone's going to have different ways that they think you can do it. But every single thing that we do is driven by research. It's driven by conversations. And I think that's why we're able to pivot. And that's why moving ahead, we are going to focus on the It's That Hot. Okay, you know, where are people probably going to come? And that might have shifted a little because it's like, well, it's probably going to be people driving. So we need to focus on that this year. For us, it was like, okay, we need these pools open because it'll be harder to push this message if there's not a pool. But really trying to pay attention to what the traveler behaviors are and understanding that they might be different. You know, there's been a lot of talk through a lot of the research that's been out is that people want these wide open spaces. They don't want to be in a condensed area. And we're very fortunate because that's how we are. We're really, as a city, we're kind of sprawly. Even our city center is kind of walkable and cute and quaint, but still very cosmopolitan and chic. And so I think that we know what we have. We're just changing the message of how we're selling Scottsdale. You know, it's this room to roam. It's this way to unwind. But we've always had that conversation. We've always had that way of showcasing our destination. So we're just modifying the message a little to make sure that they still know, because they're like, oh yeah, I love going to Scottsdale because you have this beautiful preserve of hiking and biking trails. And it's like, yeah, we talk about it all the time, but let's just make it more of a focal point right now while we know that's what people want to hear. And so I think we're in a good position because of that, but we're always going to keep listening. And right now, we know people need business, but we have to do it safely. And so we're listening to conversations where we're like, as a business, we want you to open. You need to pay attention to these guidelines. And we're sharing all of the official correspondences and saying, we can't be the voice for everyone, but we will showcase it on our website because we know people look there to book their next travel. So yeah.
That's good. No, it's good. And I love that you talk about the open spaces too, because I know there's a lot of destinations that are experiencing the need for certain local laws around how far restaurants can be, and can restaurants even be outside? Can they do all this stuff? I know Streetsense is doing a ton of placemaking work around this with different bids and DMOs, working to facilitate those conversations. Right? It is something new that existing infrastructure isn't really necessarily built to handle very well, right? And so if you've got potential travelers coming in that are looking for to have that safety, cleanliness, those kind of messages and those concerns, more importantly, alleviated, it's really important for the DMO to be collaborative with those efforts on the city. And so that I think opens up new conversations. Jay, what else, would you add that, how the role of the DMO is kind of shifting in response to that? And Will, I'd love for you to jump in too.
I think it's a great opportunity for the DMOs to show leadership on a lot of different levels. An example here, Visit Salt Lake, our local DMO here, they had a series of webinars. They brought together their stakeholders, brought together their members, gave really clear situational awareness. And that was really well received by the community to just understand what's happening, what the DMO is seeing. In working with our clients, we see a lot of opportunity for the DMOs to start to take the data that they collect as part of their regular research strategy and project that out. Because you think of all of the businesses in the community, they have their individual interests, but working together, you can foster this collective interest. And I mean, to be candid, the DMOs are digging out of the deepest hole that they've ever been in with smaller staff and smaller budget than they had prior to this. And so it is going to take everyone pulling in the same direction to get the recovery back on track. And so the more the DMOs can be leaders, not a command and control leader, but guiding a movement within their destination to say, here's where we're going. We're all going to have to roll up our sleeves. Here's how we're going to get there together. And this is how we're going to be better at the end of it as a community and as an industry. Let's go. That's the type of thing that is going to accelerate the recovery and I think lead to better outcomes both in the short term and the long term.
Love it.
Yeah, I don't think there's ever been a time where DMOs are more valuable to their destinations. And I could probably spend an hour going through ideas of things that, because DMOs are such the connectors of the industry and the hospitality industry, and that's the nature of the business. But I kind of want to circle back to the data conversation and DMOs, and really all destination marketers, and that for 10 years, we've been addicted to this drug, and this drug has been records, right? And we're not going to get records for the foreseeable future. And so what a great opportunity to take that, knowing that we're not going to, it's always hard. I think if people knew that we had to shift our reporting, shift what success looked like, but we were addicted to this drug, and so we had to come out with the new records every quarter, every month. So now is such a great time for DMOs to shift and say, what is it that we want? And what does success for our community look like? And work with the Jays and the Jamies and all the businesses that are out there that can really help track what would be a new metrics of success. Because we're going through detox and we're starting at zero. Let's define, and I think the ability for destinations to define what success for their community looks like now is critical, because then we'll start measuring what matters, not going back to measuring something that is just the way we've always done it for the last 50 years.
I completely agree. It opens up the conversation around not just what we're measuring, but, why are we measuring that, right? And I love, Jay, when you talk about, a blended kind of style of considering both local sentiment, visitor sentiment, and then understanding ratio, right? Because if you're going to think about a stewarded recovery, right? Because you certainly don't, like all of you were trying to talk about, and I'd love to, Jamie, for you to chime in here too, but is you think about, as you've kind of are balancing a lot of different things. You've got number of cases and spikes of cases, and that may not be your destination, but it might be in the origination destination from where that your visitors are coming from, right? And so all of that, you've got local economy, can you sustain, right, an increase in visitation and all that kind of stuff. So what, as you're thinking about that, what is, we're wrapping up, we've got about 10 minutes left. I'd love to kind of get from everyone some kind of thoughts for those that are tuning in and on. What are conversations we could be having? How could we be thinking about those things that we should be measuring? And maybe if we're not paying attention to them, what are they? Where could we find those at? Any kind of helpful ideas or thoughts that you guys are seeing? Jamie, why don't you kick us off?
Yeah. So, and what we're tracking is just the overall economy, and getting understanding of, is your community bringing jobs back yet? Because that's going to get a sense on how your market's on their way to overall recovery. Because if people don't have jobs, if they're not getting back to work, then what are we doing this all for anyway, right? And we got to support our communities, and hopefully they're going to get back. We had a great jobs report last Friday.
Yeah. Yes.
Unemployment rate came down. We added 2.5 million jobs back to the employment rolls over the previous month. Our expectation is that we don't get back to 2019 levels until 2022. And for some markets, it's considerably longer than that. And that anticipates a huge sort of resurgence in temporary rehirings, or those employees that lost their job temporarily, went on furlough in Q2, Q1, are going to get those jobs back in Q3. So, and our expectation is, and a huge percentage of those people get their jobs back in Q3. In the industries we look at the most, leisure and hospitality, restaurants, retail trade. So as people get back shopping, traveling, visiting these destinations, those businesses are going to rehire the locals in those markets to staff those businesses. And to the extent that that happens, that's going to make us feel really confident that this is a real recovery, and we're on our way to getting back to normal, heading into 2021.
Jay?
I think I'll just double on the jobs. Jobs are going to be so important, and it's an opportunity with unemployment being so high in the leisure and hospitality sector to be able to then show, coming out of the recovery, look how quickly our sector is bringing back the jobs. Yeah. I would just sort of highlight that, along with tax revenues and small business visitation, small business confidence, small business performance. That those are things that are going to be really important if you're in a city environment or a state environment to be able to track, because those are the numbers that legislators are going to watch, mayors are watching, city councils are watching. And if you can articulate the ways that tourism is contributing positively to the recovery in those sectors, those are going to be more meaningful to the role of the DMO and the funding of the DMO than something like your social media follower growth, which just doesn't translate out to those stakeholders.
Yeah, that's so good. I could go on, but we're going to run out of time. So I love that you just mentioned that. Emily, any additions?
I would say something else too that probably most DMOs are looking at, because it's so critical to success, especially for people that aren't here, is obviously you need the jobs. Obviously you need the people back in the hotels. So in the interim, it's critical that DMOs are working on behalf of those partners that aren't quite there yet to bring those people back so that their message is still shared. And then kind of looking ahead, I think, you know, flights are going to be a huge one that everyone's going to start looking at, because that's going to help with consumer confidence to travel. And then the other thing that I've heard, and I'm not quite sure how to measure it, so I'm going to give it to Jamie and Jay to figure that out. But all the talks is flexible booking, cancellations, and those type of policies, because the sentiment towards that, because of all of the woes that happened, you know, when all of this started hitting, I think that's what people are going to look at. I think people are going to say, okay, I really want to go somewhere for July 4th because I know things are opening. But if I book this hotel or this Airbnb or this rental car even, like, what happens if it gets shut down again and I'm out of money when I may have not had an income for a month or whatever it may be? So I think, I don't know how to measure it, but I think that is also going to be really important to look at as a new measurement, because I think that flexibility is what people are probably going to want.
Yeah, I love that. We've got a question here from Ralph that Will, I'll throw to you. Is you know, I know there's been all kinds of programs and incentives, certainly through PPP and others, right? But any thoughts or updates that you've heard about, or anything about, you know, incentives that could be created either locally or regionally that might be kind of focused on tourism that would drive that demand to influence the local job market?
I'll take that. But first, I wanted to bring one thought back to a data set that I think is extremely important for DMOs that we're not tracking. I don't think we're tracking, and I think it's more important now than ever. And that's the Gallup study on consumer confidence and our confidence in different organizations, different institutions. Because right now we have a crisis of confidence in our organizations and our institutions and political parties and government and everything. It's fascinating to see what has typically been 1, 2, 3, but typically small business, confidence in small business is at the very, very top. And that's an opportunity for DMOs that are focusing on the small businesses in their communities and getting them out front of this. Because, you know, face the facts, we don't trust marketing, right? So, but we trust small business, that there's an opportunity there. And I think that keeping an eye on that one, and that relative to some of the other institutions that historically have been high, and I'm guessing are probably going to be a little bit lower given some of the challenges we've had in the last couple of weeks. But that's just another thought on data that I think is important for DMOs to think about how we manage that moving forward. It's going to be critical. On the incentives, incentivizing travel, you know, we're seeing this in different international markets. I've seen several examples. You know, Sicily is going to pay for your, you know, half your airline ticket and every third night if you come and stay. A lot of, I've seen some Greek islands, or Cyprus is doing something like that I think is interesting. Is it the role, and DMOs have talked about that after the Gulf oil spill. There was a lot of opportunity of trying to, you know, provide gas money to get, you know, gas cards to get people traveling. It's an idea that's been tried. I don't think it's been ever really executed really well. There's a lot of accountability and a lot of risk when you start handing out money as a DMO and the world that we live in. That being said, I think there are incentive ideas that can work, and I know that U.S. Travel is actively working with the government to try to incentivize some get out and spend money, be it tax credits or things like that. You know, that is typically something that, at least here in Florida, you know, they have the hurricane prep tax relief, but, you know, maybe that can come on a federal level if we get some, you know, some tax relief on travel or regional travel or drive market travel, things like that. I think then there's the obvious ones, you know, in the doing packaging work and trying to, you know, offer the freebies or in some destinations are doing that. You know, come and book this trip in the month of April or the month of October, and here's all that we're going to give you. Kids. We've talked about one kids free weekend, I think, or kids free month. I think they're doing in San Diego already. So it's like, you know, for the month of October, kids get in all the attractions free, and we're going to, you know, free meals with the paying adult kind of thing. I think those are opportunities that could be really powerful.
Can I jump in real quick? I was going to say, I was listening to a webinar last week that Tickets, the OTA that helps with like attractions, and they were saying they had people from different markets that were talking about how people were reopening. And one of the things that people were doing was offering if you got 2 adult tickets, you would get the children passes for free, where for them, it doesn't affect the bottom line too much, but it's at least showing people, hey, we know it's a little harder in getting them through the door. And then in terms of incentivizing, I'm not as familiar with the program because it's our meetings and group side, but I know over the last few years, they've been doing like a site, like where they'll pay for them to come to do a site if they book their group in the summer. So again, going back to that greater campaign where we have our marketing message, but we also have it backed up from the other legs of our organization.
I love it. This has been so good. For those of you that have joined us today, again, thank you so much. You know, everybody here, reach out to them, look them up on LinkedIn. If you haven't connected with myself either, find me on LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, wherever. I'd love to connect with you. And I know I speak for Jay and Jamie and Emily. If we can be a help or a resource in any way, we want to be. And next week, we'll be back again, right, Will? We got another great conversation.
Yeah, thanks again, Josh. Can't tell you how much we appreciate your leadership on these. We will have this is recorded. It'll be posted up on connecttravel.com/webinars, so you can take it and share it with friends and family that are passionate about tourism as we are. So that'll be up there. We'll also send out a link with some of the big takeaways of this one, and then let everybody know about the guests that Josh has lined up a killer panel again next week. We've got Gathan Borden, Justin Briesler from Denver, Susan Whitaker, and Mitch Whitten from Fort Worth. So this will be a great conversation. And I think probably really building off of this conversation of ROI and again, how we measure success moving forward. So thanks for putting that together, Josh. You and Streetsense have been amazing partners, and Jay, Jamie, and Emily, thank you so much for offering your insight and helping us as we kind of work together to get tourism opened up and get meetings back and get people
absolutely
and get back to normal, where we won't have time for this.
That's right. That's right. Yes. Good to see you guys. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. We'll see you next week.
Thank you.
Have a great week.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.